Well, we want to welcome you to the Carl Albert Congressional Research and Studies Center. This is one of the largest congressional archives in the country. We hold the papers of 55 members plus of Congress, as well as staff and other individuals, and it's a really unique resource for scholars who are interested in representative government and the Congress in particular. My name is Cindy Simon Rosenthal, and I'm the director and curator of the Carl Albert Research Center.
Great, let's go inside.
So I want to welcome you back. I mean, this is really the heart and soul of the archives. This is essentially what is the finished product of the work that we do. The center has really a broad mission. The mission includes research, and our archives play a very significant role in that this is available to academic scholars, genealogists, historians, political scientists who are interested in policy history. We also have a teaching mission here at the Carl Albert Center, and then we have a public service mission as well, which reaches out into the community to engage communities in discussions about public policy and just the health of our institutions, our representative government, and the Congress obviously being part of that, but we're also interested in state legislative bodies, city councils, etc. When we get a collection from a member, it is deeded to us, and we then become the stewards of that collection, and we spend an enormous amount of time arranging, describing, and then cataloging at the item, oftentimes to the item level, but at least to the folder level, the things that are of significance in a particular folder, so that a scholar can go online and search our inventories and identify those things that they wish to have copies of. Or if they're going to spend a significant amount of time here, they'll identify boxes that they want to look into as they come and visit the center to do their research. So,
how did this center get its name?
Well, it's of course named after Carl Albert, who was a Speaker of the House of Representatives, the highest ranking position ever held by an elected official from the state of Oklahoma. He was third in line to succession, and he served from right after the war. After World War II, he ran for the Congress, and he served until 1977. And he rose through the ranks of the leadership to be the whip, the majority leader, and then Speaker from 1971 to 1977. So the center is named after him because we were established with a congressional appropriation as well as a state appropriation to be the repository for his papers and for other Oklahomans over the years. And so we have a collection now that is probably among the largest in the country in terms of congressional papers that you can go to one place and do research on congressional history. So let me show you a couple of the things. Let's start with perhaps some of the one of the older files. This would be from Alfalfa Bill Murray, and he was governor of the state of Oklahoma. He also ran for president and was a very interesting character, as his name might suggest, Alfalfa Bill. He was involved in a pre-statehood convention that was held at a time in which there was interest in the possibility that Oklahoma would become an Indian state as opposed to a free state in 1904. And then, of course, we became a state in 1907, and he was one of the first governors. This is from his collection. Well, Alfalfa Bill Murray becomes governor of the state of Oklahoma in 1930, and then he runs for president in 1932. Here's a very interesting little piece here. This is actually from his presidential campaign, and it's the candy wrapper from candy bars that he handed out on the campaign trail, 5 cents, and putting Alfalfa Bill before the voters. He also was quite the populist agrarian. Here's a sample of really of his platform, what he called the Murray Doctrine. The first point he says here, I hold that civilization begins and ends with the plow, that no government can stand without the freedom of the farmer, free from oppression of both physical and financial slavery. He goes on to talk about the Federal Reserve Banking Act and some of the financial institutions of the day, some themes that are probably reminiscent today as well.
How was he received as a candidate?
He was seen as somewhat of a populist, more of a fringe candidate, if you will, than a mainstream candidate. He would have been running at the same time, of course, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt was running for the presidency as well. As you can tell, we have paper in a lot of different forms. We also have audiovisual materials in our collection. That's a newer development that we're having to change some of our collection practices with. But we also have some memorabilia, which I think is oftentimes of great interest to people who are interested in the collection. For example, here we have some of our collection buttons, our political buttons. We were just talking about Alfalfa Bill Murray, and this button is probably the oldest in our collection. It says the state of Sequoia, which again was what was proposed as the name should Oklahoma have not entered as a free state, but rather as Indian state. So that's from probably around 1904, 1905. And you've got other both presidential election campaigns that came as part of the collections, as well as some of our own senators. Here we have the buttons of U.S. Senator Robert S. Kerr, really one of the very significant leaders in the history of the state, was very involved in, after the Depression era and the Dust Bowl, in literally transforming the landscape of this state with reservoirs and lakes throughout the state, and soil conservation initiatives that really underscore our agricultural economy.
How do these pins come to your collection?
Well, when we get a collection, sometimes it's somewhat organized and sometimes it's not terribly organized, but the members will have as part of their collection some of this memorabilia, plaques, other sorts of things. And then sometimes we just have people who over the years know that we are in the business of preserving political history, and they will offer to make donations to us. We generally do not purchase items for the collection. They are donated to the collection. Some of these would have come from different collections, but they're preserved here in one. You know, one of the things that the Senate Historian's Office emphasizes to members is that you want to put your collection someplace where it has the capacity not only to preserve and keep your collection, but also to process it and make it available to scholars. And that's why we urge many of our members here in the state of Oklahoma to make their donations to us. One of our most interesting collections, and one that gets used quite a bit, is Helen Douglas, who served in the 1940s and was from California. What is interesting about Helen Douglas is that she was married to the Hollywood actor Melvin Douglas, served during the 1940s from California, and had a very distinguished acting career. And so we actually have some of her stage photos, very imposing presence here. This is a promo photo from the one film that she made, which was called She, and actually the name of the character that she played in this was She Who Must Be Obeyed.
After the festival in the Hall of Kings, there will be slaves waiting at the outer wall to guide you in safety to your little world.
It is probably more of a cult film now than it is a well-known film, and it has something to do with, you know, the fountain of youth and eternal light.
How did she get involved in politics?
Well, she and her husband moved from New York and the East Coast to Hollywood, and she got involved in the plight of migrant workers in California, and her activism there also then drew the attention of Eleanor Roosevelt. She became a Democratic committee woman and then ran for Congress in the wartime era of World War II. She went on then to try to aspire from her congressional career to run for the U.S. Senate. She ran for the U.S. Senate in 1950, and she ran against another congressman from the state of California, Richard M. Nixon. And this was a very nasty campaign. You may remember that this is also the time of the beginning the rise of the Red Scare. And so one of the things that Nixon accused Helen Douglas of was a voting record that was leaned towards the extreme left and the Communist Party. And this is called the Pink Sheet. This was issued by the Nixon Campaign Committee, and accusing her of many votes against the Committee on Un-American Activities and votes against the loyalty and security legislation, votes against California, and tying her voting record to a congressman in New York, and casting both of them really as communist. You'll note down here in the corner the lipstick, which we believe is from Helen Douglas, was her response to this pink sheet that was being put out by the opposition. She was unsuccessful. Richard Nixon did win that campaign, and she did not run for another elected office after that. So her primary tenure was in the U.S. Congress. The center has a small exhibit space where we have rotating exhibits. This particular one happens to be about David Alborn, who served as governor and U.S. Senator and now is the president of the University of Oklahoma. One note of significance, we also have the papers of his father, Lyle Bourne, and just recently the retiring Congressman Dan Bourne has signed a deed to commit his papers here. So we have 3 generations of the Bourne family in terms of their paper. And you can kind of see that the range of things that are in our collection, from official correspondence and clearly political papers, to those things that are more personal and non-political, from everything from notes and cards. Over here we have another exhibit of materials that come from young constituents, children who write to their congressmen and send them handwritten letters. So you have both insight into the personal lives of these members as well as the official activities that they were involved in. The most significant part of the center's physical setting is a replica of the Speaker's office. And this is the Speaker's office for Carl Albert, who was the 46th Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. And the space itself actually had furniture and pictures and memorabilia from his Capitol office right off the House of Representatives, as well as his office in the Cannon office building, his office for his district in Oklahoma. And we've tried to maintain here many of the important memorabilia from his collection. And I'd just point out a couple things that I think are particularly significant. This display cabinet has 50 pens in it, which reflect the Great Society programs that Mr. Albert played a key role as both Majority Leader and then whip, working with President Johnson to enact what we have come to know as the Great Society initiatives. I mean, it really is symbolic of the legislative agenda. There's one other case like this, and that's at the LBJ Presidential Library at the University of Texas. He was from very humble roots, a little town called Bug Tussle down in southeastern Oklahoma. But this is a little league team from Elmore City, which is also a little town in that neck of the woods. And McAllister was considered his home, and when he left the Congress, he retired to McAllister. He didn't stay in Washington. He didn't go on to lobby or do something, to make more money. He really saw himself returning to his roots, and so that's what he did. One other little thing, he was not a tall man, which is why he's known as the Little Giant from Little Dixie, which is the name we give to southeastern Oklahoma. He was 5'4", and if you look under the desk here, you can see he has a little stool. That's his original stool to lift his feet up so that he could elevate his chair and be a little bit more of an imposing feature behind the desk. But he certainly lived up to his nickname of the Little Giant from Little Dixie.
Why collect all of these items, the papers, the physical items? Why is that important?
Well, certainly, we think of this center as a living tribute to the importance of representative democracy. And if you don't honor that history, if you don't preserve that history, we are poorer for it in terms of understanding this important institution in our government. Certainly right now, Congress is not held in high esteem by many people, but the health of our representative institutions is something that we need to care about as a society, and so part of what we do here at the Carl Albert Center in terms of that preservation, and also in terms of the civic engagement activities that we undertake, is to remind people that we cannot neglect these important institutions.